This is Jerry Kutz with another Osceola chat, and I'm joined today by Jake Pfeil, the longtime athletic trainer for Florida State University. Jake runs the program for football. Jake, how you doing this morning?
Doing well, Jerry. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Hey, Jake, let me ask you, what does your day look like now that we're staying in place? How does that affect your role in athletic training?
Well, it looks very different than what we're used to. I guess like everybody, we're luckily right now we're still able to be open just for a little while every day. Basically, with the university mandates that came out for all students that if you leave campus, don't come back to campus until you're permitted to. We had a handful of players that still fit into that guideline that never left for spring break. And of that group of players, a few of those were guys that we knew we needed to still be able to work with because they were going through physical therapy from a surgery in the last few months. So of that group, there's 4 of those guys that are still able to come to our building every day by appointment, and we're able to rehab with them. It's not just me. We've got Laura Sullivan's here, Josh Chapman's here, Jerry Latimer's here working with them, and a couple of our graduate assistants are still able to be here. So we space them out when they come in. They're able to get some good hands-on physical therapy for a couple hours each day to maintain track on what they need to get done. That being said, there's still a big group of them that did not fit that criteria that left town that aren't permitted to come back. So that's been a real concern, a real challenge. We've got them set up remotely all over the country, really. South Florida, California, you name it. We've got them set up going to physical therapy clinics and sport-specific type training clinics to maintain the work that they need to get done.
So you said going to sports rehab clinics in their area. Is that how you're handling it?
Yeah, luckily we were able to find some really good clinics, and some of these guys are in a phase of their rehab that they don't need complete hands-on physical therapy all day long. They're at a point where they're back into training and running and lifting a certain way, and there are clinics out there now that can tailor to those needs so that it's physical therapy, but it's beyond just having somebody take you through some very basic early phase exercises. They're in later phases of rehab. So we've been lucky. Some of them are like Jaden Woodby's an example. I don't know much about what's available in Los Angeles and everything's out there, but he was able to say, hey, here's a great place I've worked with in the past. We vetted them. We talked to them. We check out the facility online and speak to the people on staff there. And that was a great example of a place that's really working well for him.
Yeah, let me ask you about that. The role you now have with their physical therapist in their locality, you can call them and talk to them about how the kids are progressing.
Absolutely, I do, or Jerry will. They still have to get a prescription from our docs here. They'll write the PT prescription. They'll be sent down, but then we'll still have those conversations. They don't know who this player is. They don't know the whole history. They just know there's this person that had this surgery this many weeks ago, and they're not probably, some of them aren't used to seeing somebody that's had as much physical therapy. We work with these guys every single day when they come out of a surgery. Some of these facilities don't quite see people like that. Some of them certainly do though. So, but it's good to talk about, exactly what we've been doing with him and exactly where our hopes had been for the next several weeks for this player for the rehab.
Are there benchmarks, whether it be range of motion or strength or things like that you can sort of get the idea the guy's heading in the right direction?
Absolutely. And a lot of them are pretty standard. An example of a couple guys that have had a shoulder procedure done. They're going to be 4 weeks immobilized, and then we'll get them set up to see somebody. We've had some of them that are actually fairly recent this spring. Some of them are more down the line to your 10 and 11 week mark. Those shoulders, a lot of them will go in kind of 4-week models, 4 weeks of mobilization, 4 weeks of range of motion, 4 weeks of light exercises, and then advance to more strengthening. And a lot of that's fairly standard. Those are not things we really have to go over with those therapists at home. They know that kind of thing. But we still are going to stay in touch on it.
Being respectful of HIPAA and your role, can you mention any of the players and where they're at in their rehab?
Yeah, it's known who our players are and the guys that were out. I mean, that's been well documented. So I mentioned Jaden. You know, Jaden's around 28 weeks this week out of his surgery that he had, you know, back in September. Jaden, Keyshawn Helton's in the same time frame. Those knee injuries. Keyshawn's one of the guys we're able to have here in the building. He's been coming in every single day, never left town. So those guys are really advanced down the line. We've got some other guys. King Dent had an injury this spring. He's in a more of an earlier phase. Excuse me. He's about 8 weeks out, you know, and so he's a little more of a cautious still approach. Still have some restrictions. I mean, he's one of, for example, we had to still, you know, you're going to hit certain weeks where you got to get another x-ray done to evaluate the healing that's taking place for some of the injuries. So we had to coordinate that remotely to get that done down there, get those results back up here to Dr. Geyer so he can review them, things like that. Most of them, though, looking through my list here, are guys that are on down the line. We've got another, like I say, a couple that happened early in the spring in the tour of duty months. They're a little more newer, but we're just able to stay on top of them still. It's been, really can't complain.
Jake, let me ask you, you and Cheryl, how are you all doing with the boys in the shelter in place?
You know, it's another one I can't complain about. We're lucky. Cheryl has gone completely 100% remote work. She's getting a lot of done. I got a nice big fancy home office that we got in our new house that I put all kind of man cave stuff in, and she's taking that over. I don't use it. I use the real office still, but it's been good. You know, our kids have been great. I was talking about it with Derek a little while ago. I think if anything, the kids, they're the ones that are with each other all day long. So we're trying to just find ways to get them apart. You know, I come in here for a few hours a day and then come home and just try to take one to another part of the house or the yard, you know, and just give those guys a break. But we're doing really good. We can't complain.
How about your parents? I guess they still live in Madison, don't they?
They do. Madison's had, all of a sudden, they were kind of flying under the radar and then had a little jump. I think they've got 10 or 12 cases that have happened over there now. So they're staying back in the woods, bottom line, and they're fine.
Hey, take us through. We've got a few more minutes with you, and I wanted to have you take us through. You got your undergraduate degree at Florida State, and were an athletic trainer in football and baseball, I guess in 2000, right?
I graduated spring of 2000, yep.
Yeah. So you got to be with the 99 football team and the 2000 team?
I did. 2000 football, I was not. That fall of 99 was my senior year, and then I graduated that spring. Yep.
So what was that like, that 99 team? And then you also were with the 2013 national championship team.
Yep.
What are some of your memories of those two teams in particular?
Well, what I remember about the 99 was I felt that's what I'd grown up a Florida State fan, you know, right down the road and got to come here, but it kind of felt like that was just normal then. You know, those were back at the end of that run where every year where you were in the Sugar Bowl or the Orange Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl, and that was just normal, and run into a championship, and it's like that was going to happen. You didn't really expect nothing different. You were just kind of along for the ride too, you know, as a student working in the program. But it was awesome, of course. You know, we had I think it's a big reunion this year. Which one? Well, that was 20 years, I guess. Yeah. So it was really neat seeing a lot of those guys, you know, that you went to school with. My 2013 experience was very different, obviously, in the role that I had in it. You know, that was, again, as a student, you're kind of along for the ride and you're working your tail off and all that, but you're just taking it all in as you go. And then that 2013 year was very much I'll always think of it as a culmination of the years building up to it. You know, I started over here in football in 2011. So that 2011 and 2012 kind of build up that was going on in the program and running into that 2013 year. I'll always remember that as the rewarding part of it. The 2013 year was probably an easier year for me, if you will, as far as the workload. You know, things were clicking on all cylinders and we were healthy, beating people's brains in, guys are resting in the second half, you know. The harder years were the years leading up to that. For me, we were grinding it, really hard practices, really hard year-round programs, and even after 2013, when you're already there, and the maintain of 2014, and that was a really eventful year, I guess, if you will, for the training room. I mean, we were really busy 2014 with the win streak pressure and all that on top of you. So I'll always remember that. People think, well, you must have worked really hard to win that championship. That year, it was just working, The harder years, believe me, you work just as hard in a year, whether you're 6-6 or if you're 13-0. You're not changing how hard you work. It's what's happening during that year. You work harder in those years sometimes that aren't quite as successful.
Jake, that's a great point you just made, and I want to double down on that. When you looked at 13, you went through that year without injury to starters. I mean, as I look back to 99 and to 93, they were similar in that respect. We started with a group of offensive linemen, and we finished the season with that group of offensive linemen, which allows them to develop continuity. And in those 6 and 6 years, you're just riddled by injuries, typically, aren't you?
Yep, they definitely go hand in hand. I think one of the 2013 stats is every player that started game one started in the Rose Bowl, and that's sure. There's a lot of injuries going on throughout the year that you're managing and maintaining and treating. Absolutely there are, but sometimes it's just luck is finding it as well.
Yeah, that's what Coach Bowden used to always say. He said the definition of luck is injuries.
Yeah.
And if you don't get injuries at the same position, it's when you get, your offensive line gets riddled, or you lose 2 starting tailbacks that you get in trouble.
Absolutely. I feel like almost every single year that I've been doing this, there's one group that it'll start to creep towards, the 13 being the exception, but that can make it a little stressful for the people that work in here with me, for sure. When there's a couple of guys in a small group like tailback or something like that, or even in spring football now too, that you've got injuries that occurred during the season. You've got to take care of them as soon as the season gets over with. Well, you still got to have spring football and function, and that can make life pretty stressful when we've only got one running back. We're trying to get him through, and we're trying to scrimmage, and the same with offensive line. Obviously you got to have 10, and there's years where we've had to mix and match guys, to get through a spring game. So
I've got 2 last questions, and I want to be respectful of time. I know you got to jump. One is, do you see a difference with Mike Norvell, his approach to the athletic trainer and managing the team from some of the other coaches you've worked with?
I'll say this about Coach Norvell. He is maybe the most organized person I've ever been around, coach or not. The way he asks for information, the way he takes the information and retains the information that I give him on the injury report, for example. I've been in a situation now since he's been here that we meet less, but we accomplish more and people know more. That's been incredible. Obviously, we've only had 3 practices together, but we did have the full tour duty month as well. He takes the information I give him and rolls with it.
That's awesome.
There's been very little questioning, and that's good. I think there's just been a trust factor and a professional level to just hit off right from the get-go. So I'm really excited where we are moving forward with him and his whole staff, really.
Good. Hey, the final question, and we're going to get back to playing football eventually. And before you put on the pads and hit, I think there needs to be a certain amount of lead time to get the guys in shape so that you can prevent injuries. That's part of your job responsibility. What is the nation of athletic trainers thinking would be an appropriate time?
That's a really good question, and it's one that's starting to fly around a little bit. I don't think there's a consensus yet. it has to happen, of course. There's got to be some. It's not every year there's an acclimatization period, but that's coming after a full summer of workouts, and the acclimatization period honestly is kind of silly because we've been acclimatizing for the last 2 months prior to training camp. We're going to need a bigger acclimatization period, if you will, now. That's for sure. I don't know that we've got that answer just yet, but I've seen big numbers. I've seen, well, we need a full 60 days prior to camp. I think that's extreme, really extreme. Do we need a few weeks? Absolutely. These guys have to get back in town. They've got to run. They've got to sprint. They've got to, yes, acclimatize to heat whenever the time may be that we come back, but they've got to acclimatize their bodies back to a workload. A lot of them are doing great work right now. You've seen what our strength staff has put out to these guys, and it's awesome. And they're showing them everything they can possibly be doing in the situation that we're in, but nothing replicates what they're going to do when they get back here with us. I think that's something that's still going to be developed here over the next couple of weeks.
I expect that'll be an ongoing conversation.
Absolutely.
I'll come back to you on that some other point. But, before you were here, maybe when you were maybe in the beginning of your career as a student, Coach Bowden would have the guys go away from campus for 6 weeks.
Yep.
And then come back. And they'd have that even before that, they'd be gone the whole summer. And they'd come back and they'd have a 1.5 mile run, and they had to make a certain time by position. And it was what I expect you're going to see. Some guys were in great shape and made their times, and other guys that you could predict weren't. And so it's going to be random who's in great shape and who isn't. So
I think that's all Coach Storms and his staff are every single day contacting guys and making sure and making them understand just that. Everybody's in this situation right now. There's been no other time that I can ever think of where it's been up to the player to on his own motivate himself and decide, what am I going to do with this time that I have? And it's going to make a difference when we all get back together. There's no doubt about it. So,
Jake, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. We appreciate you, and best to the family.
Thanks, man. Same to you.